Statement.
Mr. Speaker.
I call the member for Belmont.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today I rise to continue my efforts to expose the facts around the Barangaroo development. Last year I outlined evidence which points to a $1 billion gift to Lend-Lease by the former government and the obligation on the current government to act. My speech highlighting Lend-Lease's underpayment for Barangaroo is further corroborated by my understanding that Lend-Lease agreed to pay approximately $200 million for the Darling Quarter land, which now houses the low-rise Commonwealth Bank buildings. When the GFA and relative location of the site is taken into account and compared to Barangaroo's superior location, it again demonstrates that the former government failed to obtain full market value for Barangaroo. In response to my speech on this issue last year, the BDA stated that it had Barangaroo independently valued, and in any case, the Barangaroo sale was a result of a competitive tender process, which ensured the best possible price was obtained. However, GIPA requests to the BDA have revealed that the BDA commissioned 3 valuations. But valuations of what? Valuations of the unimproved capital value of Barangaroo for the purpose of determining a carrying value in the books of the BDA, and it never commissioned a full market valuation of Barangaroo South. The true market value of Barangaroo South is significantly more than the unimproved value obtained by the BDA. The unimproved capital value is referred to as, quote, the Barangaroo valuation in BDA board minutes, and may well imply that the board were allowed to believe that this was the true market value. The supposedly intense development tender, competitive tender, was in fact a very selective invitation by the BDA to Lend-Lease, Multiplex and Mirvac to bid for a public-private partnership, with the selection criteria being a subjective mix of architectural merit, financial outcomes and capacity to understand the development. Mirvac declined to tender early in the process, citing difficulty in obtaining development funds, and at the time Multiplex was suffering a major disaster at the Wembley Stadium and must have been a questionable contender. Predictably, the so-called partnership is almost unbelievably one-sided, with the government being deprived of in excess of $1 billion on the land sale. Further, the BDA's financial forecast in the Auditor General's report indicates up to $1 billion of government money will be spent on public works to facilitate the Lend-Lease development, including remediation, reconstruction of the headland, building a pedestrian tunnel to Wynyard, a new wharf, the cruise ship terminal, and worst of all, potential exposure to cost overruns on remediation and public transport infrastructure. If Wynyard cannot cope with Barangaroo traffic delivered by the tunnel, the government will be facing multi-billion-dollar expenditure to increase heavy rail infrastructure. As has been pointed out, the public transport problem may not have existed at all if Barangaroo had remained at the scale envisaged before the BDA took over from Schiffer. It is increasingly obvious that the government would be billions of dollars ahead and the project would be well underway if the BDA had simply stuck with the contest-winning design of Hill Thallis, kept the scale at 380 square metres, sold the building sites individually and left the approval process to the statutory authorities that handle other city buildings. The only beneficiary, in my view, to this convoluted Barangaroo process is Lend-Lease. To date, GIPA requests made since the election...
Can I ask the member, point of order?
His knowledge of Barangaroo may or may not be correct, but private members' statements are supposed to pertain to matters in the members'
and
electorate.
this is my electorate.
No, it is in the seat of Clover Moore. So I would like the member to explain how this impacts on his electorate, rather than go through the torturous and long, his torturous understanding.
Thank you.
It's no surprise the member is seeking to reduce. It's no surprise the member is seeking to interject in my speech because the former government is culpable for a disgraceful history on Barangaroo. My local community is subject to the Part 3A requirement because of the noise impact on the Balmain precinct for 18 months during construction. It's also something relevant to my electorate because of the influence in particular of these planning decisions on members in the community of Balmain. It's increasingly obvious that the government would be billions of dollars ahead if the project would have already been underway if the BDA had simply stuck with the contest-winning design, kept the scale to 3,800 square metres, as I said. To date, GIPA requests made since the election to Schiffer to get the value of the Darling Quarter transaction and to Sydney Ports to get the land rentals of Macquarie Bank and KPM buildings have been denied, apparently to prevent us obtaining further evidence to the true market value of Barangaroo.
Point of order.
First of all, I note that you did not actually rule on my previous point of order. Secondly,
what have you got to hide, Kristina?
The member is continuing to... The member is continuing to
it's the same point of order. Can I ask the member to sit down, please?
It is not in his electorate.
I believe it is. He's speaking in regards to his electorate.
No, actually, Mr. Speaker, excuse me.
I asked you to sit down, please.
The piece of land is not
I asked you to sit down,
please.
The member Heffron, can I ask you to sit down, please?
What have you got to hide? It's of relevance to my electorate. FOI requests the Lend-Lease contract and BDA minutes were denied. GIPA requests to the BDA for the tender documents responses by Lend-Lease and Multiplex. Minutes of the meetings and BDA board minutes are unredacted Lend-Lease contract, the KPMG validation report and other requests to establish the validity of the tender process have been denied. beyond the statutory response times? Is it any wonder that questions are being asked of the former government whether the true market value was obtained for the people of New South Wales? The government must honour its core election commitment, and I'm calling on the President to ensure that Schiffer, Sydney Ports and the BDEC comply with the spirit and the level of people legislation. Unless we investigate the failings of the last government processes, how can we build a system that won't fail?
Thank you. We're considering private member statements, so I call the member for Wyong.
Thank you.